The Hiroshima Prefectural Health Department attributed 60% of deaths to burns. 30% died from blast debris. Radiation killed 10%. The thing most people fear about a nuclear weapon is its least lethal effect. You were taught to fear the wrong part. 10 pieces of inherited survival advice. Each one sounds right. Each one has been exposed against federal planning documents, weapons physics, and the dose math that separates a survivable outcome from a lethal one. Most of what you know came from a cartoon turtle, a sign that no longer means anything, and a pill that protects one organ. Here's what the corrected version actually looks like. Start with the phrase you've never heard. 4 words: get inside, stay tuned. That's FEMA's current nuclear detonation guidance. 4 words that replace everything you think you know. Every myth on this list fails at a specific, measurable point. Every corrective leads back to those same 4 words, but you won't believe that yet. So let's start with the turtle. Duck and cover, you've seen the film. Bert the turtle drops to the floor, tucks under his shell. Kids in the 1950s practiced it under wooden desks, and for the last 40 years, the cultural consensus has been that this was absurd government theatre. A school desk won't protect you from a nuclear weapon. Photographs from Hiroshima show vaporized concrete, shadow outlines where human beings used to stand. Physicists in the 60s said the drill was a joke. The dismissal feels airtight. It's also wrong. Duck and cover was never designed for ground zero. Nobody at the Federal Civil Defense Administration believed a wooden desk would survive a fireball. The drill was designed for the glass zone. That's the ring where you survive the blast wave, but your windows don't. Floor-to-ceiling school windows become walls of flying shrapnel, travelling at 120 miles per hour. The Office of Technology Assessment documented that 1 psi of overpressure shatters standard glass out to nearly 19 miles from a 1 megaton airburst. 19 miles. That's a ring covering more than 1,000 square miles. In that ring, the most common injury is laceration. Deep, arterial, fatal laceration from ordinary window glass accelerated to bullet speed. A desk doesn't stop a fireball, it stops glass, and it stops glass extremely well. FEMA's current guidance still tells you to do it. Drop below window level when you see a flash. Turn away. Cover exposed skin. The physics haven't changed since 1951. What changed is that you were taught the drill was pointless, so you trained yourself to do the opposite. You trained yourself to run to the window, to look at the mushroom cloud, to stand in front of the largest sheet of glass in your building at the exact moment the blast wave arrives. The myth didn't just remove a survival behaviour, it installed a fatal one. It taught you that the response is binary: kill zone or safe zone, nothing in between. The reality is that the in-between zone is where most people are, and it's where the drill actually works. If that rewrite surprised you, the next 9 are worse. Subscribe now, because this list gets harder from here. The fallout shelter sign. You've seen it. Black and yellow, 3 triangles inside a circle. It used to be everywhere. Basement entrances, parking garages, government buildings, schools. At the programme's peak, there were roughly 400,000 outdoor signs and over 1 million indoor markers across the country. Every marked building had been surveyed by the Army Corps of Engineers for mass shielding. Minimum protection factor of 40. That means the radiation dose inside was at least 40 times lower than the dose outside. The structures still stand. Concrete doesn't expire. The mass that stops gamma rays in 1962 stops gamma rays today. So the sign should still mean something. It doesn't. The community shelter program was discontinued in the 1970s. Supplies were never maintained. The crackers rotted. The water barrels rusted. The medical kits expired decades ago. Nobody replaced any of it. New York City started physically pulling the signs off buildings in 2017 because officials decided they were creating a false promise. Hawaii removed all of theirs after the 2018 nuclear false alarm when panicked residents ran to marked buildings and found locked doors. No shelter manager, no water, no food, no dosimeter, no ventilation protocol. Nothing but concrete walls and a yellow sign. You reach that building and you get shielding. That part is real. The mass is still there. But you get shielding and nothing else. After 48 hours without water, you're facing a decision. Stay inside the shelter with a protection factor of 40 and die of dehydration. Or leave the shelter, walk into the fallout field and find water. The sign bought you structural protection. It bought you zero logistics. And in a shelter scenario that lasts 2 weeks, logistics kill you faster than gamma rays. Potassium iodide. KI. The most purchased nuclear preparedness item in the country. After every escalation in the news cycle, KI sales spike. People buy it in bulk. They feel safer. They should understand what they bought. Potassium iodide works. That's not the myth. Taken within 1 to 2 hours of exposure to radioactive iodine, KI blocks over 90% of iodine 131 uptake by the thyroid gland. Poland distributed it to 18 million people after Chernobyl. It's the only large-scale, real-world proof of mass KI distribution, and it worked. Childhood thyroid cancer rates in Poland did not spike the way they did in Belarus and Ukraine, where distribution was delayed or absent. The pill is real medicine. It does a real thing. Here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't protect you from external gamma radiation. It doesn't touch cesium-137, which is the dominant long-lived contaminant in nuclear fallout. It doesn't address strontium-90, which binds to bone and stays there for decades. It protects one organ against one isotope. That's it. If you take KI and walk outside into a fallout field, you have a protected thyroid inside an irradiated body. The pill didn't fail. Your understanding of the pill failed. You bought confidence in a solution that covers roughly 5% of the actual hazard. The CDC explicitly warns about overdose risk in infants and people with thyroid conditions. Adults who take KI are also consuming doses that could have gone to children, who are the highest risk group for radioactive iodine because their thyroids are smaller and more active. The most common nuclear preparedness purchase in the country is real medicine applied to a fantasy diagnosis. You can drive away. That's the plan. The bug-out bag is packed. The route is memorized. The tank is full. You've seen the movies. The family loads the car, hits the highway, and outruns the disaster. Now look at what actually happens when millions of people execute that plan simultaneously. Hurricane Rita, 2005. Between 2.5 and 3.7 million people evacuated the Houston metro area. A drive that normally takes 4 hours took 18 to 25. 107 people died during the evacuation before the storm arrived. 23 elderly residents from a nursing home burned alive on a bus that caught fire while stalled in gridlock on Interstate 45. The storm they were fleeing killed fewer people in the Houston area than the evacuation did. Now add fallout. A car's protection factor against gamma radiation is approximately 1. That means sitting in your car gives you no measurable shielding advantage over standing in an open field. You're wrapped in sheet metal and glass. Gamma passes through both without slowing down. You're sitting in gridlock, engine running, air intake open, pulling fallout particles into the cabin. FEMA's planning guidance for response to a nuclear detonation says it explicitly. Stop driving. Get out of the car. Get into the nearest large building. The interior of the concrete office building you just drove past offers a protection factor between 10 and 100. You traded a 100-fold shielding advantage for a steering wheel, and the gridlock you just created is now blocking emergency vehicles from reaching the people who are actually injured. The bug-out fantasy doesn't just fail you, it kills the people behind you. Boil the water. It's the universal instinct. If water might be contaminated, boil it. This works for biological contaminants. Bacteria die at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Viruses die. Parasites die. Radioactive isotopes don't. Boiling water that contains dissolved radionuclides evaporates the water. The contaminants stay behind. You're concentrating them. Every minute of boiling makes the remaining water more radioactive, not less. The CDC warns against this explicitly. The correct methods are reverse osmosis, distillation with a separate condensation vessel that captures the evaporated clean water and leaves the contaminants behind, and ion exchange filters rated for radiological removal. These are essentially absent from household preparedness kits. You own a life straw. It removes bacteria. It does not remove cesium-137. Deep groundwater from a sealed well is the safest source for the first decade after a large-scale surface detonation. The instinct to treat your water is correct. The method that comes to mind first is lethally wrong. The basement. Everybody knows this one. When the sirens go off, go to the basement, and the advice isn't wrong, it's incomplete. A typical residential basement offers a protection factor of 10 to 15. The house above it offers a protection factor of roughly 2. So the basement is 5 to 7 times better than the main floor. That sounds good until you learn that FEMA's minimum standard for a designated fallout shelter is a protection factor of 40. Your basement is a factor of 3 to 4 below the minimum. In light fallout zones, that gap might not matter. In heavy fallout corridors, it's the difference between a survivable dose and a lethal one. Heavy fallout corridors aren't hypothetical. 400 Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles sit in silos spread across Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, Colorado, and Nebraska. A counterforce strike against those silos means hundreds of ground burst detonations in a concentrated corridor. Ground bursts produce massive fallout. Prevailing winds push that fallout east. If you live in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Illinois, you're not in a blast zone, you're in a fallout zone. And in that zone, a protection factor of 10 is not enough for a 2-week shelter period. The corrective is specific. You can improve your basement, pile mass against the walls, books, full water containers, dirt-filled trash cans, anything dense. Put mass on the floor above you, move furniture, load bookshelves, drag the heaviest objects in your house over the ceiling of your shelter area. Every inch of added material increases your protection factor. But here's the part nobody wants to hear. The strongest fallout shelter in most cities isn't your basement. It's the central core of a multi-story office building or apartment complex. Interior hallways, stairwells, rooms surrounded by other rooms on all sides. Those spaces reach protection factors of 100 or higher. The best shelter in your neighborhood almost certainly doesn't belong to you. It belongs to your community. It's the building you walk past every day. The one you've never thought of as a shelter. The corrected version of this myth doesn't point you home. It points you toward the strongest structure you can reach, shared with the people already in it. That realization changes everything about how you plan. 2 weeks, that's the number you've heard. Shelter for 2 weeks. After that, you're fine. The 7-10 rule is real for gross gamma decay. For every 7-fold increase in time after detonation, the radiation intensity drops by a factor of 10. After 49 hours, the ambient radiation is 100 times lower than it was 1 hour after the blast. After 2 weeks, it's 1,000 times lower. That's the math everyone knows. Here's the math they don't. Cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years. Its ecological half-life, the time it takes for concentrations in soil and water systems to halve through natural processes, runs between 180 and 320 years. Strontium-90 has a half-life of 29 years and binds directly to bone tissue. It enters the food chain through soil, moves into grass, moves into milk, moves into you. The Chernobyl exclusion zone is still restricted. That's 39 years and counting. 2 weeks marks the end of the acute phase. It is the beginning of the chronic phase. Contaminated water, contaminated soil, contaminated food chains for the rest of your life. Surviving the shelter period is not the finish line, it's the starting gun. Nuclear war means one bomb, one city, a flash on the horizon. That's the mental model. It works for exactly one scenario, an improvised nuclear device, a terrorist weapon, a single detonation in a single city. It does not work for the scenario federal planners actually train for. A counterforce first strike against the Minuteman fields involves a minimum of hundreds of ground burst warheads, detonating across a corridor stretching from Montana through Colorado. Each ground burst creates a fallout plume. Those plumes drift east under prevailing westerly winds for 500 to 1,000 miles. A household in Des Moines that planned for a distant city strike has not planned for the strike that actually targets them. Not the city, the farmland, the silo fields beneath it. The single detonation model lets you calculate a safe distance and feel comfortable. The actual targeting doctrine erases the concept of safe distance for the eastern half of the country. You can outrun the fallout. You know which way the wind blows. You'll drive perpendicular to the plume. This fails for a reason most people never consider. The wind that matters isn't the surface wind. It's the entire altitude column from ground level to the top of the mushroom cloud, which can reach 80,000 feet or higher. Wind speed and direction at 30,000 feet can be completely different from wind at 5,000 feet or wind at the surface. Fallout particles of different sizes settle at different rates. Large heavy particles fall fast and land close. Fine particles ride upper altitude winds for hours and land hundreds of miles away. The result is an irregular footprint with hot spots at unexpected distances. Castle Bravo, the 1954 thermonuclear test at Bikini Atoll, contaminated approximately 7,000 square miles from a single detonation. The fallout pattern looked nothing like a straight line downwind. You cannot model this with a weather app and a compass. The corrective is simpler and harder to accept. Assume any location within several hundred miles of a ground burst can receive significant fallout. Plan for sheltering, not positioning. Get inside. Stay inside. Stay tuned. Fallout means glowing green. You've seen it in every movie, every video game, every cartoon. Radioactive material glows. It pulses with eerie light. It turns people into monsters or gives them superpowers. Real fallout looks like fine grey dust, sometimes white, sometimes tan. It looks like ash from a campfire. It settles on your hair, your clothing, your skin. It sits on every horizontal surface. You could walk through it without knowing what it is. The myth's real damage isn't the visual error. It's the psychological consequence. The cultural image of radiation as invisible, permanent, mystical corruption produces fatalism. People who believe they've been contaminated don't bother to decontaminate. They assume it's over, they sit down, they stop acting. FEMA guidance says removing your outer layer of clothing eliminates approximately 90% of external contamination. 90%. Taking off your jacket and your shoes. Washing exposed skin with soap and water removes most of the rest. 5 minutes. That's the investment. 5 minutes of basic decontamination before entering a shelter is the single cheapest survival intervention available after a nuclear detonation. The Hollywood trope turned a 5-minute first aid step into an existential verdict. It replaced action with surrender, and the surrender is what kills you, not the dust. Burns killed 60%. Blast killed 30%. Radiation killed 10%. And every myth on this list is about radiation. Because that's the one you were trained to fear. The gap between the fear and the physics is where people die. The sign promised shelter with no logistics. The pill promised protection against one isotope out of dozens. The car promised escape with no shielding. The basement promised safety below the minimum standard. The 2-week clock promised an ending where there isn't one. Each myth is individually rational. Take the pill, drive away. Go to the basement. Wait 2 weeks. Each one becomes collectively destructive when executed by a population that never learned the corrected version. The corrective is 4 words. Get inside, stay tuned. Get inside the strongest structure you can reach in 10 minutes. Stay inside for a minimum of 24 hours. Stay tuned to any functioning broadcast for official instructions. Every myth in this video fails because it assumes nuclear survival is individual. The corrected version of everyone points to the same answer. It's not. The strongest building near you, shared with the people already in it. That's the shelter. That's the plan. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud, because it means trusting strangers and abandoning the fantasy that your basement and your car and your pills are enough. Which of these 10 did you believe until today? And where did you first learn it? The value of this channel is knowing what's actually true, even when the truth is worse than the myth.